Howdy, and welcome to the F1 Hatchet. This is the post-race reaction for the Canadian GP. What was your thoughts on this race? Were you expecting rain during this race? Were you wanting more mayhem because of the wet weather that the rain would have caused? Or were you satisfied with the race that we had today? I thought it was a fairly good race. I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. I thought the pit strategy that could go for the 2-stop or a 1-stop, where you're stopping early or stopping late, kind of gave it a little bit extra in all the passing that we had in that top end of the field, even though Max wasn't involved in most of that. Thought was fairly good, kept me entertained. I really enjoyed this race. But what was your thoughts? I'm kind of interested in hearing what you think. I normally go from the back of the field to the front of the field, just kind of listing what each driver has done, to kind of give an overview. So I'll start off with Logan Sargent, who didn't make it very far in this race. He had a power issue on that Williams, dropping him out fairly quickly, causing a yellow, but that didn't last long. George Russell, on the other hand, was doing fairly good in that top 6 maybe, but kind of clipped the inside of the turn 9, or actually turn 8, and slid out on turn 9, hitting the outside of the wall pretty hard on that right rear tire, and actually breaking his front wing as well. He thought he was actually out of the race, as he called over the radio that he thought he was sorry that he took the vehicle out, but he managed to limp that Mercedes back over to the pits, where they were able to change and look at that car over and send him back out. He actually got back into the points after that, and was doing fairly well, but I'm not sure. I'm guessing that there was some issue related to that incident that caused his rear brakes to heat up more than they were supposed to, where they end up having to retire that car early. So unfortunately for George, he came out with no points. Nick DeVries had really interesting battles with K-Mag, trying to get by him, and then at one point overshot it and pushed K-Mag and himself out into the runoff area, where there wasn't really a way to turn around, so they had to back up. So he had to basically wait for K-Mag, because he was behind him, to back out, and that pushed them back into the backpack, where they didn't really have a chance to gain anything else out of that race. But K-Mag was in several different races and battles throughout this race, so I'm sure he had a good time, even though he came out in the back of the pack. Juan Yu Zhou was doing fairly well, coming in from 20th up to that 16th position, just kind of battling those spots. He did gain 1 spot on the start of the race. We didn't really see that battles that he was in a whole lot, but I know he was in a couple of those battles with Nick DeVries, K-Mag, and Yuki as well. So he did a fairly good job of where he started off in this race to get back up into the 16th, not quite into where he needed to be, where his teammate was, but at least showing a better showing than he did earlier in this qualifying session. Nico Hülkenberg was 5th, even after that 3-grid penalty that he got from having a red flag infringement. I think he was speeding when the red flag was going around, so after he had hit that 5th spot. But he could not maintain that Haas up into that top area, and dropped down fairly quickly, not where he wanted to be, especially after that qualifying session. But I have him, he hit DeVries at one point where they were battling it out as well. He had 2 pit stops, lost 1 position at the beginning of the race. Just really wasn't Nico's day. Yuki came in from 19th up to 14th. I think he did okay, except for the very start of the race where he lost a position, but was just steady, worked his way back up to 14th. Lando Norris had a interesting 5-second penalty for delaying, not going as fast as he could around the track to double stop those McLarens, and pushed them back into the backfield, which gave him a 5-second penalty, which then dropped him back down into that 13th spot. He was up in that top 10 places before that, so he was doing a fairly good race for that McLaren, but didn't quite pan out with that 5-second penalty where he could gain ahead, even though they timed that pit stop where he got the last pit stop in before they gave him the 5-second penalty to try to help with the positioning of Lando. Pierre Gasly qualified 15th after getting blocked in qualifying and made it all the way up to 12th. He gained 2 spots from the start of the race and had pretty much of a standard battle with the rest of the folks in that area and ended up in 12th. Oscar Piastri qualified 8th, dropped down to 11th. He passed K-Mag on lap 25 for 10th, and then he looks like boxed on lap 38 to switch from hards on that second pit stop. Oscar was doing fairly well, keeping those positions, dropped down a couple of places, so I think he was doing overall with that pretty well with that McLaren that he's pretty much a rookie in. So decent job for him. Valtteri Bottas had a pretty good day, I think, in that Alfa Romeo, where they haven't been really showing what that Alfa Romeo can do. I think some of those upgrades finally are kicking in to help him out a little bit. Qualifying 14th and ended up 10th, actually gaining a point that they sorely needed over this long haul. He did drop down 2 spots off the beginning of the race, but had a pretty good battle with K-Mag and Norris during this stint and just kind of ended up into that last point spot. So that was good for Valtteri. Lance Stroll was down at 16th spot on qualifying due to that weird qualifying wet session and ended up in 9th. He did gain 2 spots on the start of the race and had a fairly straightforward race, kind of working through his pit stop strategy, and was able to pull out that 9th position. Near the end of the race, he got it by like the very end, got that 9th position from Valtteri. So that was a good push for him. Ocon dropped from 6th place to 8th place. He had that wobbly wing, so we'll have to see if he gets dropped down any farther, because I know the FIA were looking at that because Norris was complaining about Ocon's rear wing, and it was fairly wobbly going around at the end of that race. So we'll see if they deem that a safety hazard or not. So hopefully Ocon can maintain that 8th position, but if not, he might drop out of the points due to that issue with his rear wing. Alex Albon did a fantastic job in this race. He qualified 9th. Ninth in this qualifying session, ended up 7th overall, getting wonderful points for him doing that battle on that long run, the medium tires, and he was actually voted the driver of the day, and I probably agree with him. And that Williams, being that in-pack car, being able to get up into that front runner spots and maintain that through the defensive battles that he did all day long for him. So good on Alex for getting up there and giving Williams some extra points, pushing them up a little bit farther in the constructors' battles. Sergio Perez, again, didn't quite make it on those slick tires versus wet tires during the qualifying session, so he ended up in 12th for qualifying, worked his way back up to 6th. He did get the fastest lap because he did gain that gap during the race so that he could pit near the end and get those softs on and get that fastest lap in for him. So gaining that extra point, which is strategic for him, even though he's back in the back trying to maintain that battle with his teammate. But really didn't quite make it as far as he wanted up into the front. He couldn't pass those Ferraris or the Mercedes at this point to try to get up into that front pack. But a decent job, I guess, overall, coming back from 12th in this race. Carlos Sainz qualified 11th, made it up to 5th, did a decent job. Overall, he was trying to pass his teammate, but he was given pretty much team orders to not really fight with his teammate during this race. So he kind of stayed behind his teammate on 2 occasions, and he was kind of heard on the radio of that. So a fairly good job of just getting points and maintaining that in this track that they weren't quite qualified on that qualifying session, making the right choices at the right time. Charles Leclerc was qualified 10th and ended up 4th. Same story for him, except for the fact that we heard that he wanted to really stop immediately during the qualifying session and swap from those intermediates to the soft tires, and they basically wanted to get his banker lap in on those intermediates, and so that cost him some of his positioning, and I think there's some talks going on. I'm not sure if I would have gone against that team order in the sense of like really pushing that. I think getting that banker lap like Lewis Hamilton did, just pushing forward and getting, he could have maybe gotten ahead of him if they really try to really stick with the intermediate tires instead of swapping and risking it when it was getting wetter on that qualifying session. But overall, a fairly good run for him in those Ferraris. Didn't really have it for the Mercedes or the Aston Martin of Alonso. During this race, they kind of came up there and threatened a little bit, but didn't really put any super pressure on them during this race. So a good running for them for their vehicle in this kind of scenario. Lewis Hamilton qualified 3rd, ended up 3rd. He started off and actually took over that second position from Fernando on the start of the race, which was great to see, but couldn't really maintain that pace. And Alonso finally was able to regain that second position and kind of maintain that for the rest of the race, even though at the end it sounded like Alonso was having some issue with either his brakes or some other component on his vehicle, so he had to lift and coast a lot more than he wanted to put pressure on Max near the end of the race. But as I said, he stayed within 4 seconds of Max for most of the race. So yes, Max could probably step on it a little bit more than he was during this race because he had that gap, but he wasn't running away with it like we've seen in the past races here. So good on Fernando and good on Max for being able to maintain that lead from the start and that restart after that safety car and maintain that first position and just kind of easily maintain that position without having to deal with the people behind him. So this gets us to the driver's standing. So we see here Max easily with that 195 points ahead of his teammate with 126. Alonso gaining a little bit with 117 points. And we see George Russell dropping behind Carlos Sainz because of him dropping out during this race. The other thing we see is Alex Albon jumping up into the field to 12th because of those 7 points that he was able to gain, or 6 points he was able to gain during this race. So that was the main changes we see in the driver standings, and the constructor standings are pretty much the same, with Red Bull with 321 points over Mercedes 167 points. So quite a big lead over that second position. And then we see Alfa Romeo jumping Haas with that 1 point that Valtteri Bottas got, and Williams jumping up to a 9th from the 10th, putting Alpha Tauri in the last position with 2 points. So we have a couple weeks. We have the Austria GP, or the Red Bull Ring. So we're going back to Red Bull's turf. So we'll see how well the Red Bulls can, push ahead of the rest of the field, or if the field has caught up to the Red Bulls at a couple of weeks at the Austria GP. Till then, I will see you on the